Hey everyone, I'm Army Gaming. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Mountezuma. Mountezuma is the divine leader, the shaman, the protector of his own reptile empire inside the Aztec civilization. He holds all three roles himself because he considers everyone beneath him, even Coquelin, who he has as nothing else than a bodyguard in spite of his proven skills. And so here we have the different forms of Mountezuma, as a baby, as a teen, as an adult. And as of the time recording this video, there's a total of 34 Earth Legendary monsters, 4 of which you'll notice are Nemesis monsters. We have Warthog the Skull Crusher, the Mountain Splitter, the Sunbringer, and we have Hydrotilla the Riftmaker. And the reason I mentioned the Nemesis monsters are because when I'm ranking the monster in terms of stats, power, speed, and life, you're going to notice he's a little displaced. And so I just want everyone to take that into account. And so anyhow, starting off with power, this monster has a power of 3,377, which places him in 22nd place along with Atum's bodyguard. So he's not necessarily the strongest monster, but I will mention that he does have some pretty powerful AoEs, which you can feasibly use this monster as an attacker. This monster has a life of 30,763, which also places him in 22nd place, this time tied with a lot of monsters like Baragor, the Warrior, Chin, and Bastet. So it's kind of funny, right? This life seems pretty tanky, but in the Earth element, this really isn't tanky. It's 22nd place. And oddly enough, this monster has a speed of 3,465. And I say oddly enough just because of the monster design. He's on this giant rock chair. I mean, I guess it has legs. But anyhow, a speed of 3,465, this actually makes him the 5th fastest Earth monster in the whole entire game. Actually, the speed stat itself, 3,465, this is the 3rd highest speed stat. The only monsters faster than Mountezuma are Baba Yaga, who has the fastest speed currently in the game, 3,498. And then we have Hydrotilla the Riftmaker, Hiram the Tenacious, and Tessidae, which all boast a speed of 3,476. So Mountezuma is actually the first monster to have this speed, which is common with many other elements. And so we have ourselves one of the fastest Earth monsters. And by the way, this monster is a team race monster, so most people that get this monster will get an advantage because they're probably going to get him at rank 3, which means at level 115. And lastly, he has the trait Mountain, which is one of the best traits you can have. You can't be immobilized by stun or by freeze, and later on he also has a skill that gives him an extra turn, so he's technically also immune to possession, all forms of possession except 2-turn possession. And so he's a really great monster just in terms of stats and his trait. I love the design also. And so now let's just talk about the skills. And before actually discussing every skill, I will say that this monster is quite odd, because there's about 7 different skills I would want to put on this monster, and that normally never happens with the monster. Typically there's only like 5 skills you struggle between. The only time I struggle with like 7 skills are with Nemesis monsters, because they have a skills group 4. Well, this monster, he only has a skills group 3, and I still can't decide what exactly I want to do with him. Like I mentioned a little earlier, his power isn't necessarily that high, but he does have some skills that could make him quite a decent attacker. And you all saw his speed, he's one of the fastest Earth monsters in the game, so you should already be thinking about making this monster as a pure deny monster, giving him 3 speed runes. And so the way this analysis is going to go, it's going to be one of the most confusing ones. I'm just going to talk about the 7 skills I really like, and then I'm going to tell you guys pros and cons about it. And at the end, I don't think I'm actually going to be able to decide on what to do with this monster, so you guys are going to have to decide for yourselves, and you guys can help me. You guys can let me know what are you going to do with this monster, what runes you're going to put, what skills you're going to put. With that being said, let's jump into the skills. His ultimate skill is Earth God Energy. Deals heavy earth damage to all enemies, may poison all targets, may apply damage reduction to all targets. And so his ultimate attack is an earth-based AoE that deals 65 damage to all of the enemy monsters, and on top of that it applies poison, which reduces the enemy's HP by 10% for the next 4 turns, as well as reduces their damage output by 20%, and it also applies damage reduction on top. So the damage output is actually reduced even further. And so this is a really great skill regardless of how you build your monster. If you run this monster as an attacker, most likely this would kill the enemy monsters that aren't earth based, and even if they weren't killed, well, now they're poisoned, now they have damage reduction, so the damage output they're going to be dealing against your monsters is going to be really reduced, and they're not going to be killing you. If you're running your monster as a deny monster full speed runes, well then it's just a really great ultimate, because although you won't deal much damage, same thing applies. Now they're poisoned and they're dealing really minuscule damage against you, so it's a great ultimate for this monster. And so the first skill I want to talk about is actually in skills group 1. It's called Mountezuma Threat. Deals moderate earth damage, activates cooldowns on all enemy skills, requires cooldown. So Mountezuma Threat is an earth based attack that deals 40 damage to a single enemy monster. It costs 28 stamina, has a 3-turn cooldown, which is kind of high, but it does activate the cooldowns on a single enemy monster. And it's really nice to be getting more monsters that activate cooldowns. Previously in the Earth monster, the one that comes to mind is Pigridu, but he's incredibly slow, so he wasn't that usable. But now we have Mountezuma, who can actually use this against the main enemy threat. And so if you know that the enemy monster only has cooldown skills, you can use this to immobilize that monster. And most Earth monsters, from what I've been looking at, do seem to have only skill sets that would have at least a 1-turn cooldown. The only monster that comes to mind that has no cooldown is General Atum. He has his mace attack, which deals 60 special base damage. And so if you're facing a General Atum that has strength runes, you might not want to use Mountezuma Threat against him. Or you actually, later on, you have an AoE, but we'll get into that later. And there's also Hydrotilla, of course. Hydrotilla has a no stamina, no cooldown, so you wouldn't want to use Mountezuma Threat against that monster, but it's just really nice to have it. And so just to give you guys a quick example, in an Earth War, if you're facing an enemy Brontis, most likely that enemy Brontis doesn't have any 0 cooldown skills. If anything, he might have Angular Maze, 0 cooldown, 45 special based, and it dazes, but see, that isn't really a huge threat from the enemy Brontis, because the main threat from the enemy Brontis is a Mega Stun or an AoE stun. So this is where having a skill like this really comes in handy. And so that's the main reason I would consider using this skill. Most of the time you only need to mobilize one main threat and then your other monsters can do the rest. He does, like I mentioned, have another AoE skill, but that has a huge drawback, which again I'll discuss in a little bit. And so there's pros and cons to both. You know, this one's a single target without that huge drawback, and the other one is an AoE but with a huge drawback. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So moving on to skills group 2, we have Fatigue Hit. May poison target, gains 1 extra turn, requires cooldown. So here we have a pretty simple attack. It costs 28 stamina, 2 turn cooldown, and it gives you an extra turn. And it also poisons the enemy monster. Now, you guys know how I am about extra turn skills. To me, they're a must-have skill because they're essentially immunity to possession. I mean, as long as you're controlling the monster, of course. And a skill like this is actually even good for defense, because if the AI was to start off with this skill, well, now one of the enemy monsters is poisoned, now you get an extra turn, and now you get to use one of your other skills. But anyways, going back to the human player, so even if you were to get possessed, which right now the main fastest earth monster, as I mentioned, is Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga has an AoE possession. You have the mountain trait, you can still get possessed. All you have to do is poison yourself, poison one of your teammates, you get an extra turn, and then you're free to attack the enemies. And as you're going to see, this monster has a ton of great skills to choose from. And so from all the skills this monster has, I would say this is the must-have skill. At least to me anyways. It's a mandatory to have an extra turn skill on your monsters. Next up we have Slime Storm, deals moderate earth damage to all enemies, damage reduction for all targets. So here we have an AoE, a 40 damage earth based AoE that costs 37 stamina, check it out, with no cooldown, and it applies damage reduction. Now what really psychs me out about this skill, it's a 40 damage AoE with no cooldown. That's insane. If it was special based it would have been more insane. But no cooldown, meaning that if you run Mountezuma on defense, which you totally can, and if there's another enemy Mountezuma that does cooldowns activated against you, or even if you're fighting Tamiron that does cooldowns activated against you, it doesn't matter. Your defensive Mountezuma is still going to be able to attack, which to me is just insane. 40 damage, especially if you give this monster at least one strength rune, and they're applying damage reduction, it's just a really great skill. So if you're going for the strength route, you might want to consider Slime Storm, and if you're going for the full deny build, I think you could also consider it, but at the same time, you have better deny skills to choose from. This isn't deny, this is just damage reduction. It's nice that you have a skill to use, but yeah, I would mostly recommend this on a secondary deny build maybe, or definitely on a strength rune, not on a full deny build. And next up we have Toxic Disease, deals moderate earth damage, may poison target, may possess target, requires cooldown. So here we have another earth based attack, targets a single enemy, deals 45 damage, costs 31 stamina with a 2 turn cooldown, it poisons and possesses. Now there are some obvious pros and cons to being poisoned and possessed at the same time, because when you're poisoned your damage output is reduced, so if the enemy monster is attacking its own teammate, it's going to be dealing 20% less damage than it normally would have. However, the positive to that is that the enemy monster is poisoned, so that first turn they attack their teammate, they lose 10% of their health, and then when they actually get their own turn in, that's another 10% of their health, so they're going to lose 20% of their health. And so I guess it kind of balances out. And so this is one of those skills that you can run on any kind of build. You can run it on a full deny build, you can run this on an attacker build because you can deal enough damage to almost kill the enemy, and then maybe the enemy monster may AoE himself, single target himself, attack one of his teammates, or you know, the poison takes effect. So yeah, this is definitely runnable on an attacker build or in a secondary deny build, which is pretty much the deny build, but you just run team speedruns instead of all speedruns. So a skill you may want to consider running for all of your builds. But then we move into skills group 3 and we have Elder Curse, deals heavy special damage, may possess target, requires cooldown. Here we have an attack that deals 50 special base damage, costs 28 stamina, 3 turn cooldown, and it's a 2 turn possession. That's right, not a 1 turn possession, it doesn't poison or anything, it's just a pure 2 turn possession, which is amazing. And it's once again, this is an amazing skill for all sorts of build, and especially for the deny build, because now you can 2 turn possess one monster, and on the following turn, 1 turn possess another monster, and so for one whole turn order, there's going to be 2 monsters on your team, which is great, it's just fantastic. And so you definitely have a great incentive to run both of your possession skills. And if you recall, I did mention that Hydrotilla the Rift Maker does have a 0 cooldown, 0 stamina skill, so cooldowns activated doesn't work against Hydrotilla, but guess what, you can just 2 turn possess Hydrotilla. So even though you may not be able to counter Hydrotilla with cooldowns activated, you can still counter him with possession. Now of course Hydrotilla is faster than you, so on a same rune basis, Hydrotilla would go before you, but that's fine because you can activate your Rune Guardian, you can manipulate the runes to make yourself faster, and so that's definitely a positive argument for why you can use this monster as a main deny monster. And next up we have Acid Slime Rain, deals heavy earth damage to all enemies, may poison on targets, requires cooldown. Here we have an earth-based AoE that deals 55 damage, costs 40 stamina, 2 turn cooldown, it's an AoE poison. And what's amazing about this skill is that it's a 55 damage AoE. There's other monsters that have a 55 damage AoE, but on top of being 55, this one also poisons. Which, as I already mentioned, does two things. The enemies lose 10% of the HP for the next 4 turns, and their damage output is reduced. And so this goes back to what I was saying about this monster being able to be used as an attacker. I know it doesn't seem like it because of his low power, but actually, given this monster's power and this 55 damage, this AoE will deal more damage than a monster that has, say, a 3575 power with a 45 damage AoE. So that's how powerful Acid Slime Rain is, and it's one reason you could run this monster as an attacker. And just to be clear, what I mean by an attacker, I do mean a monster with 2 strength runes and a speed or team speed, but also because of the variety in his skills, the possession, the extra churn, you could also just treat this monster as one of those monsters that you give the rainbow build. You know, the 1 strength, the 1 life, the 1 and just have him be this monster like a jack of all trades, someone who can attack, someone who can take damage, someone who can dish out effects. So that's another reasonable option. You don't have to make him a pure deny monster, a pure attacker. You can run him somewhere in the middle, which is what I was saying earlier, of like a secondary deny monster. Although with a secondary deny monster, I think I would just do 3 team speed. Whereas with the 1 strength, 1 life, 1 speed, that would be also with the offensive skills like Acid Slime Rain or like Slime Storm. And so yeah, we'll get into runes more in a little bit after we discuss the last skill, Mountezuma Revenge. Activates cooldowns on all enemy skills, activates cooldowns of its own skills, requires cooldown. So this skill deals no damage, it costs 30 stamina, has a 3 turn cooldown, and it activates the cooldowns on all the enemy monsters while activating the cooldowns on yourself. And I know what everyone is thinking, Timerion. We have an Earth Timerion, but with a huge drawback, which I alluded to at the very beginning when I was talking about Mountezuma threats. The huge drawback here is that you activate your own cooldowns, and if you look through all of his skills, 2 turn cooldown, 3 turn cooldown, 2 turn cooldown, no cooldown, so Slime Storm. So you would be able to do Mountezuma Revenge and then follow it up with Slime Storm. So that'd be pretty nice. Fatigue Hit has a 2 turn cooldown, and Threat has a 3 turn cooldown, and then you have your other skills which I didn't discuss, which do have a 0 turn cooldown, but you wouldn't realistically run them. So going back to Mountezuma Revenge, that huge drawback, you activate your own cooldowns. But if the enemy monsters do have a 0 cooldown skill, they can still hit you. I actually don't really think of Timerion when I think of this skill, I think more of General Thetis. General Thetis has Stamina Devours, which she drains all of the enemy's monster's stamina and then drains her own stamina. Except the huge difference between General Thetis and Mountezuma is that General Thetis is a 100% accuracy, it's guaranteed to immobilize the enemy. The best they can hope for is their ultimate. They're gonna have no stamina, so they can't do any attack. With Mountezuma Revenge, if you do cooldowns activated, well, aside from the 5% chance for the enemies to get their ults, they can still do an attack if they have a no cooldown skill. So you're not completely safe. This isn't really a guaranteed immobilizing, unless you know that the enemy has only cooldown skills, or if they do have a 0 cooldown skill, as long as you know it's not a threat. Other than that, you're not really safe, and then you immobilize yourself for 1 turn. Actually, even 2 turns. If you don't run Slime Storm, you're immobilized for 2 turns. Look at the cooldowns on everything. The least you have is a 2 turn cooldown. And so if you do Mountezuma Revenge and you're not running Slime Storm, you've immobilized yourself for 2 turns. That's not really good. I don't equate this Timerion. It's more like General Thetis, but with a bigger drawback because the enemies might still be able to hit you and you've immobilized yourself for 2 turns. Once again, unless you run Slime Storm, which I guess you would be able to do back to back twice. What is that? Mountezuma Revenge, 30 stamina, 37, 37. That's 67, 104, and then you can finally use one of your other skills. So I'm a little iffy how I feel about this skill, and I think that I'm leaning more towards the do not run this skill. You have better skills to choose from, like I mentioned, the 2 turn possession, your single possession, the extra turn skill, a single cooldown's activated, you don't have that huge drawback, and so you're foregoing your AoE deny skill, but because it's not a guaranteed AoE deny skill, it might be better just to go with your other skills. I mean, come on, sometimes you only need to immobilize the main threat, you know, if you're facing a Hydrotilla, possess the Hydrotilla for 2 turns, and then you're pretty much good. Hydrotilla might deny his own team, you have your other monsters to attack, so you're kind of good there. And this is one argument to not running this monster as a full deny build, because he doesn't have an AoE deny, a guaranteed AoE deny. And that's why I said it's a really hard choice. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to you. Do you want to do the 3 speed runes? Do you want to run Mountezuma Revenge? Do you not want to run it? I think if I was to give this monster 3 speed runes, and I was to do Mountezuma Revenge, Slime Storm is a must. You just have to, because you need to be able to do an attack. Otherwise, you've just immobilized yourself for 2 turns. And then, like I mentioned, Fatigue Hit, and then I'd go with the 2 turn possession. So that would be my 3 speedrun Mountezuma build. Mountezuma Revenge, Elder Curse, Fatigue Hit, and Slime Storm. And another 3 speed Mountezuma build you could do is Elder Curse, Toxic Disease, Fatigue Hit, and Mountezuma Threat, which personally I think is the one I like the most, just because, like I've mentioned again, most of the time, as long as you immobilize the main enemy denier, as long as you immobilize that one huge main threat, you're kind of solid, you're kind of good. And then if you want to, instead of running both possession skills, maybe you don't think you need a single possession, that's when you can choose to run Slime Storm or Acid Slime Rain, with myself leaning more towards Slime Storm just in case you face another monster that can do cooldowns activated. At least there's still an attack you can do. And then as far as treating this monster as like a secondary deny monster, it'd be the exact same skill sets I mentioned, and then the only thing you would change is the runes. So you would give this monster like 3 team speed runes, just so you can help your main deny monster go first, and then hopefully Mountezuma goes last, and then you're free to do whatever you want, whether it's a 2-turn possession, whether it's the cooldowns activated if you're running the cooldowns activated, or the single possession, whether you need to do fatigue hit because maybe the enemy monster did an AoE possession or something. Like, you can really do a lot if you just have this monster go last. And so that's definitely one option. This is one of those legendary monsters where you can give him 3 team speed runes and just see how the battle plays out, and then have him do whatever is best for you. You could also run Acid Slime Rain because it is an AoE poison. It also deals a nice amount of damage, so that's definitely an option. And of course, like I mentioned, you can also make this monster as an attacker, so give him 2 strength and a speed or a team speed, run the 55 AoE, run the 40 damage no cooldown AoE, and then I would run Elder Curse, the 2-turn possession, as well as fatigue hit because you still want to be immune to possession. And of course, you can run him with 1 strength, 1 life, 1 speed. And the only change as far as skills I would make there is instead of running Slime Storm, I would run one of your cooldowns activated skill, whether it be Mountezuma Threat or Mountezuma Revenge. But again, I just right now have really huge mixed feelings about Mountezuma Revenge if you don't have Slime Storm. It's like you just really shouldn't run Mountezuma Revenge if you don't have Slime Storm. You can run Slime Storm without Mountezuma Revenge, but vice versa doesn't work. You cannot run this skill and not have Slime Storm on your skill set. And so, like I said, this analysis was going to be confusing. But what can you expect from a monster that has 7 different good skills to choose from and so many different ways to build them? And it really just depends on the kind of player you are, the kind of monsters you have to pair him up with, to make a team with. For example, if you have a monster that does cooldowns deactivated, you can totally run the AoE cooldowns activated, but then you're also using one of your teammates to use his turn to do cooldowns deactivated. So I don't know, it really depends. Do you play competitively? Do you play for fun? What monster do you have? There's so many factors that are going to play into what kind of build and what kind of runes you're going to run this monster. So I'm really curious to know, what are you going to be doing if you get this monster? Are you going to run with all speed runes? Are you going to give him a strength, a life, and a speed? Are you going to give him 3 team speed? What are you going to be doing with this monster? Oh, and actually, before I go, it slipped my mind, as far as running this monster on defense, I think he's also a pretty good monster. Fatigue Hit, Slime Storm, Acid Slime Rain, and Mountezuma Revenge would be a really good skill set for defense, because regardless of what the AI does, the enemy monsters are either going to get hit with damage reduction, they're going to get hit with AoE poison, they're going to get hit with cooldowns activated, or they're going to get hit with a single poison, and then, you know, you get an extra turn. So regardless, it's one of these 3 things. Well, for the next 2 turns, they're going to be hit with 40 damage, and you're going to be applying damage reduction. As far as the runes for defense, I would say 1 strength, 1 life, and 1 speed. I think that's the best, really. You know, you get more life, you get some damage output, and you're fast enough to the point where the enemy deny monster won't get 2 turns in before you get 1 turn in. And so with that last little bit of information, that is going to conclude my analysis on Mountezuma. Once again, please let me know, what the heck are you going to be doing with this monster? I am really curious to find out. Best of luck to everyone on your Monster Legends adventures, and like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.